All right, welcome back to Digital Recruiter Podcast. Today, I have Brandon Glyck, CEO of Quantum Search Partners, fastest growing Inc. 5000, 2021, 22, 23. I just wondered what that meant and how you do that, which is pretty cool. He is just super successful agency owner. He's had a producer go through Digital Recruiter program. I just really enjoyed our conversations this year. I knew he would be an awesome guest. So, Brandon, thanks for coming on, man.
Of course, appreciate you asking me to be here.
Of course. Well, let's dive right into it, kind of, so the audience can kind of get to know you. Like, talk to us about how you got into recruiting. You've been at it for about 20 years. Like, how did it all start?
Yeah, so I have I know everyone kind of falls into recruiting, as they say, but I think my story is a little unique, even with that. So, going back, it was 2006. I was playing football at Princeton and, got hurt during preseason and ended up taking some time off. And, my dad at the time had a successful kind of one-person recruiting shop.
Yeah.
And, so basically during that time I took off, started working with him. And this was, like I said, this was 06. And his business was, was very successful in the 90s. This great sort of like lifestyle business. And, as the 2000s came on, vendor lists started popping up. It got a lot more difficult to be a one-man shop at that point. And but he had one big client. AIG was his big client. So I'm 18 at the time, and started making placements during that time off. Fast forward to 2008, so I'm going back to college to play football and do all that good stuff. AIG gets caught up in the whole mortgage-backed security crisis, so that account goes on hold, and we're freaking out at that point. What do we do? So I guess 19 or 20 at that point, he buys me a book of computer executive contact info, which is, it would be like today's Zoom info, but it wasn't that fancy, back in 08. And I just started pounding the phones. I mean, it was 100 calls a day. I had this little cold call script and effectively just started bringing in business kind of one by one. Went back to school, played 4 years of football, graduated, and it was basically cutting classes on a regular basis, taking, recruiter calls, going to meet with clients, just kind of a unique, situation, supporting the family business effectively. And then, post-graduation, it was just the two of us, kind of successfully growing, the business through, at that point, thankfully wasn't as much cold outreach. There's a lot of relationships and referrals that have been built. And then we made the decision in 2015 to really start growing. And now we've been, as you mentioned, we've been Inc. 5000 the past 3 years. We've got a much larger team that we've built out. We work with, some of the biggest, Fortune 500 companies. We work with, top consulting firms. We do a lot of work with early stage tech startups, and really have grown like a really, nice business over the past few years. So a little bit of a unique, kind of how I fell into it. But yeah, I started when I was 18 and haven't looked back.
I love that. And I've talked to a few owners that really cut their teeth at 08, 09 stretch. Mm-hmm. Talk this year, 2024, is, it's so hard to get business. There's nothing out there, yada, yada. But that was a way worse time, right? Like, how do you compare kind of those 2 years or this year to that era?
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's a good question. I feel like there's a lot more noise in 2024.
Yeah.
So there's technically, you can recruit, back in 08, you had to be focused in a niche. You had to be, you were regionally focused in most instances. You didn't have LinkedIn, or LinkedIn was in its infancy at that point.
Yeah.
So you didn't necessarily have the reach from a candidate perspective. So, part of it was more difficult in the sense that you were, focused on your region. And it was very relationship driven. It still holds true today. But I think the big difference is in 2024, you have access to the entire country and beyond. You can recruit anywhere. You can recruit from anywhere. so in the market, the past few years, the past year or two has been more difficult, but there's also just so much more access to opportunity, if you're able to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So how have you, because I mean, you do a great job posting content, being kind of the lead, I would say probably marketing person as well, right? For your
Sure.
firm. Like how did that kind of experience, like the cold call list and bringing on stuff in that era, and like AIG goes on hold and you back up against the wall, like how has that molded you in terms of like, was that part of that? Here's what I'm trying to say. Would that experience kind of inspire you to start posting content, right? I would say the last like few years, it kind of like, I'm just curious how like that journey, like when that started to click for you, like, hey, this is a channel that we can leverage. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, because it's still something we're learning, and I think we're getting better at. And I see folks like yourself that do an amazing job with LinkedIn content, and we've started to see a lot of recruiters now posting content. So I think part of it is kind of following the trend, but the other part of it is in the 20 years I've been in recruiting, you build up quite a network over that time.
Yeah.
I have, I don't know, 15,000 LinkedIn connections, but I'm not like, you can't engage with that many people at once, even if you're the best relationship-based business developer, which I like to think, that's been our bread and butter. So what I realized is by posting, I'm getting engagement from that entire network. I'm getting engagement from people that, maybe it was someone that was a candidate or a client of mine 5-6 years ago I haven't spoken to. What better, connection point? Oh, you liked my post. We haven't spoken in 6 years. How have you been? How are the kids? It creates, it's in a way it's inorganic, but it creates organic connection opportunities that you wouldn't have if you're not taking advantage of that.
Absolutely. Right. It reminds people that you're there. And what's one of the biggest things in recruiting? It's timing. Right.
Yes.
And are we always trying to figure out, well, do I call them here? Do I leave a voicemail there? Wait, when do I email? Is it 3 to 4 days? When I had someone in the group ask me that yesterday, I was like, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days, like test it out. But like, just don't forget to post as well, because, it's almost like changed the equation of like the old school, like cadences and all that. It's like, there's some stuff there, right? There's some rules. I don't want to send 7 messages in 7 days, but like, you don't have to worry about that as much if you have content and marketing and connected and you're out in front. You let timing do its thing, and it's like it's kind of relieving to let go of that control, right? Of just like posting. It's like the timing is going to get there. I just got to get better at communicating, being clear with my market, talking about the problems we solve, and that I understand their pain points. I actually know how to solve them. If we just kind of interact and figure it out, like it takes away that pressure, right? Compared to like 15 years ago, I'm sure.
Definitely. Yeah. And well, I think the difference also is it's become so easy to do those email cadences or LinkedIn campaigns or what have you, that everybody is doing it.
Yeah.
And most people are doing it really poorly.
Yes.
So it's also a way to stand out in a way that's more genuine. At the end of the day, we're not selling a software product. We're selling ourselves primarily.
Yeah.
So if you can, what better way to differentiate yourself? You're not going to differentiate yourself by sending the same email cadence that every other recruiting firm is sending. Yeah. Some of the LinkedIn posting, and kind of we'll get to this probably later in our conversation, but just the relationship building piece of recruiting, that is the biggest thing that differentiates the bigger billers from the people that just do okay.
Well, I want to talk about that, because I know you're very prideful on that piece, and I was as well when I was at Aerotech, and pride myself on it now. Right, you can't be perfect, but your approach can be a certain way, right, and can stand out. And the way you respond to things can stand out. But like, what's been your perspective? Like, what have you learned over the years on the relationship building piece, and some kind of the key things that you like leaned into, and things maybe you learned to kind of avoid in terms of building some of those relationships that you have with some of your clients?
Definitely. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think, over 15 years of doing this, the biggest thing that's come to light is the fact that there really is this, call it the compound interest effect. We think about that in, finance and accounting terms, but, it definitely applies to recruiting and relationships. It's like I mentioned, like, we're not selling a product at the end of the day. We are the product. And when they're, what's really the differentiating factor from one agency to the next, at face value? At the end of the day, it's, that client or that candidate, feeling that you truly care about them, that you're going to provide a service, an accountability really that's a level up. And, I think I mentioned this, but you find that, if you're keeping in touch with people, clients, candidates, but honestly, candidates is where it starts. Most folks start in recruiting when they get into the recruiting business. They're not doing sales and business development off the bat. That's where it starts. Like, are you treating your candidates with respect from start to finish? Are you providing them the feedback that they deserve from start to finish, and in a timely manner? And then are you keeping in touch with these folks even when they're not a fit for the role? That's something that people remember. And what I found is, that's something I do pride myself on, and our team really puts a lot of time and effort into cultivating those relationships. And, that's just led to a lot of business over time. Candidates leave, they might not get your position, but they might end up as a hiring manager at another company. If you gave them a good experience, you're the person they're going to think about when they, when they're able to hire for their team.
Well,
so that's,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Finish the thought.
No, I was going to say that's been a big part of our, kind of organic business development growth. And that's why, in some of these downturns, we still have had a pretty darn solid flow of business, because we have relationships we can tap into, that we've built over the years.
The compound interest that is recruiting in a sense. I mean, that is exactly it. And it's interesting. I've heard and I've talked about, I've even said, like, it's not, we're not selling a product sometimes, like, right. The non-political correct term is like, you're quote unquote selling people, really matchmaking people.
Yes.
But you're right. It really is just you or it's me. Like we're selling us as a matchmaker in our process, the way we attack hiring problems and business problems. Like that really is it. And I think that's actually a much better way. I'm just going to kind of keep saying it that way going forward, because that is it. And I think it's again empowering in a sense, because okay, what can I do better, right? It drives you to kind of, you have to be humble. You're not going to always get it right, but you also have some things that you do have a strength that you could double down on or triple down on. I think that's what I kept telling you, and Zach is like, what is that? Right? Like lean into your strengths, double down on that in your marketing and your outreach, and own that piece of it. That's what companies want. And, I had it on a call yesterday where the person was like, man, it's like, I finally talked to a recruiter that gets it. And it's just like, all I did was ask about him, and I inferred some things with my industry knowledge, and I knew I was uniquely able to like know the issue with like B2B and B2C and like sales reps and all that stuff. But I'm like, what's going on? Let me guess. Have you seen this, and that? He's like, yep, that's exactly it. I'm like, okay, well, dive into that. Explain that to me. And it's like, that's all this job is like that right there. Now, it's that a lot of times, a lot of different conversations, and managing, no shows and no feedback and all this other stuff as well. But like at the core of it, it's just like that, like showing people that like you're curious, that you're listening, that you're dig, that like you're going to fight to fix problems.
Yes.
If you just focus on that, like, doesn't matter if you have Zoom info or not, or Tripify or not, or whatever else, like you can figure out that stuff. Like that's the core of it, of like, that's why people buy from you. That's why they're going to pay you 30, 40, 50,000 on placement fees, right? Even 10,000.
Well, it's interesting too that you bring that up, because we have all these new tools coming out. Like at first, for me, the big thing was in 08, 09 was I was pushing, we got to use LinkedIn. We have to invest in this. This is the future. And then, then it was even the video conferencing over the past few years. That's been a big change. It gives you an opportunity to really get to know your clients. We historically would try to meet with every client, but you're mostly talking on the phone until recently. And the video conferencing have made it a much more personal process. And then now with all the AI tools coming out, and you hear about AI is going to eliminate the need for recruiters and all these different kind of doomsday posts about it. But at the end of the day, the best recruiters are differentiated by the human element, and the really, really good recruiters that are going to be the most profitable and successful long term are going to marry those things. They're going to use the AI tools to be more productive, and then they're going to double down on the human element side of recruiting. And if you can do those two things, like you're unstoppable at that point.
It's exactly it. Like that is exactly what I've been saying. Like it makes good recruiters great recruiters unstoppable. Yes. And I even shut a lot of things down over this summer to start to look at that and really focus on where could we, looking at the email tools, looking at the AI stuff, and really focusing on that. I think it's easy to get in the rat race, especially on my end, of just like, you bring on people, but like I need to like actually focus on this because the AI got really good in the first like 15 months, and ChatGPT really kind of came on the scene like March, April 2023.
Sure.
It's evolved, right? There's so many more tools and all that, and I know there's a lot of noise. So I'm like, well, my job is to kind of help distill that noise and figure it out. And so we just brought on a partner to kind of run some email, like strategic email and AI, and kind of scrape different job boards. Jobs been open 3 months, and you're looking for a psychiatrist. Well, we can pull all that data on the psychiatrist. I mean, just with some old school stuff that even like Brian Fink showed me last week. He's recruited McAfee. Has been all the big firms on the corporate side, but then you can marry that with like, give me who you think is the hiring manager, not just HR and the CEO, but all that, and like have the right input. So that's stuff that we're going to be testing out in the next few weeks. So instead of me trying to be like, oh, I got to, coach 100 recruiters, like, no, I got to do this and figure that out, and then kind of bring that to the market or use that to leverage our team, because that is the way of the future. I have the recruiter part, digital recruiter, but like we gotta always be working on the digital part. And I just feel
but then you can also make your messaging that much. Like you can spend more time on your messaging, making it more personalized. Really doing the right things that make a difference instead of having to focus on the things that we were guessing on previously. And now we have tools to make it that much easier.
That's exactly it, right? How can you be relevant, right? And so we'll have lists of like 20, 50 people, and I want to test out a bunch of different campaigns and not be like, not just like the MPC approach, but almost even beyond. Like, hey, I saw this been open for 6 months for he's maintenance mechanic. Like, how has that search been going for you, right? Like, or what have you guys how have you approached it? If you could do that at scale with AI, that's the magic. Versus, can I work on this role? Can I work on this role? Well, what's your fee? Exactly. What's your fee? Right? Or I have the perfect candidate. Okay, we'll prove it. And then you have no one, right? and stuff like that. It's just like, conversations at scale is going to be the gold with automation and AI, like relevant conversations. And so like, that's what we're building towards. And it's super cool with like what is able to happen out there and stuff that, you couldn't do 15 years ago. And I'm with you. I'm just like, man, when I started 2013, 14 at Aerotech, like, I've always said this is the cheat code. Like, I love the relation piece. I know how important it is, but it's hard to do that and train your team and go get new business. Like, do it at a high level. So again, that's why this stuff is.
I actually am curious your take on this, because we do a little bit of the MPC approach from time to time, and we do have decent amount of success with it. But I've always been a bigger believer in if I'm reaching out to connect with someone, it's literally just to get to know them at first. I'm reaching out to someone who could potentially be a hiring manager down the line. But, I found a lot of success. Again, it's a longer game approach than, getting the opening immediately that's posted. But, I guess, do you believe in like a healthy balance of those two things? Is it, would you say, the MPC approach or some of the more direct outreach has been more effective? Like, I know you're dealing with, this on a daily basis with your company. Like, what's been the most effective?
It's a great question. It's nuanced. So cold outreach MPC, it's an uphill battle. You'll get some interest, but kind of some of the points, like people do fake MPCs, and I've seen them get burned. So you're wasting all this time to just get burned or not come through. Like, what's the point? Like, go actually talk to 10 candidates and flip them around and actually have a real MPC. The best MPC, especially when I did this at Aerotech, was I had my top 20 accounts, my target accounts, and then I got as much intel as I could, right? How much do they use staffing agencies, all that. And I would always ask, like, what's a skill set like you're always interested in interviewing or seeing? And like, so the best MPCs went to my target accounts, went to my clients of like, if my team were to make 10 calls on a skill set, what would that be? That would be like, you would want to see. That's it. Like, that's your best MPC. Now, you learn that about your niche, your industry. You can probably start to infer on cold companies that you know nothing about what they're going to always be interested in seeing. And so that's what I did with mechanics and electricians all day. And that's how I broke new accounts. I would lead not with a resume, with references. Like, we had this person, they're looking, here's the reference, all that, when you want to interview. I would bring the agreement with their name on it. They would sign it and they interview it that day or the next day. Like, that's how targeted I was with like cold MPC, because I saw they were hiring. It's like, I just take it a step or two further, because I could mass blast 10,000 companies, I guess, or list. Like, what's the point? Where I could do a little bit of research, because again, for me, I was just focused on sales. I could actually be a salesperson and do my research, show me I'm intentional. I got way better impact. And I started all these relationships on a way better foot. like with much more respect and credibility. And all that. That's why I got a world-class NPS score rating, like net performance score from my clients. Cause like from the beginning, I ate dirt for the first year or two trying to figure this stuff out.
Yeah,
but that is what I ended up figuring out. And I went, I was at middling at 4K in spread. It got up to 16K in a few months because that's just like it clicked. And I just did that. And I had my recruiting team be the engine of my NPCs, but it was all strategic. It just wasn't lazy. I think that's the difference. And people just get lazy with it, hoping and wishing for business. Like, no, be intentional, and your prospects are going to feel that from your outreach. And it just happens to be,
Well, it is interesting because, I think it becomes easy to quantify it as a recruiter being lazy when they're not doing the business development. And half the time it is. I think the other half of the time, it's just not knowing what to do, not understanding the process, that gets you new business, how to do it effectively. And then what ends up happening, it's tough to balance at times recruiting and business development. So I feel like, we've had it many times where recruiters or account managers look at business development and it gets so daunting. It's like, oh, I have to be doing 8 hours a day of cold outreach and follow-ups. And you don't have to start with that. You can start with just reaching out to your existing clients consistently and upselling on, other positions you could be working on. It could be, following up with a hiring manager you haven't spoken to in 3 months. It could be, doing 5 or 6 messages a day to get started. But I feel like that initial upstart period, because it is difficult at the end of the day, that's a big hurdle for a lot of recruiters. And it's something we even struggle with our team, trying to get them motivated around it, because you don't get that immediate gratification necessarily. So it's, I don't know if you have any advice on your end, how do you deal with that?
I do, and I know you now. No, I love it. People are going to love it. So I think it's, I think you and I have been talking about this. It's March, honest. And I make owners think about it in a couple different ways. Number one, do you need them to do BD? Or are you good enough, right? You're marketing, you have the tools, you have the face. Do they need to, right? To accomplish your goals? Number one, it sounds obvious to think of, or wait, of course they need to do it, but maybe they don't. Maybe you are good enough and great enough for the whole team and to build. Now, maybe you hit your capacity and you can't do it. And maybe in terms of at least the intro calls, and maybe you hand it off to your team and they run with the intake and the qualification and all that. And they don't have to do this stuff cold. That could be a pathway to make it a little bit easier. Build a can, with what I did with our recruiters at Aerotech, and what they coach us on is break the logo, break the account, and then get a big account, hand it off to your recruiters, and get them comfortable with the account management over and over again, which I know you definitely do.
Yes.
That's a huge part of it. And then kind of just layer it on, right? If they're working on roles and they feel like, well, I get my commission because I get these candidates. Well, how can we make your recruiting operations more effective and more efficient, right? I think that's one of the things I advise you on. Hey, have you looked at the system with your team to actually get more coverage with candidates, get more quality submittals, and actually be able to free up time, to free up that mental bandwidth and energy to focus on some BD efforts? And can you make a post or 2 a week, right? Totally. And can you have a BD campaign going? Maybe that's automated, right? And all that. And so that's just, again, those are some foundational, just what you want to accomplish as an owner, what you're trying to just get to, what's the end result. And then knowing the day to day, it's it doesn't have to be just okay, I want you to do sales, go make some calls. It could be actually starting with making your recruiting more efficient and effective to free up the time to then, okay, maybe you make a couple posts and just focus on that. Just get the marketing right and get going, and maybe have a networking campaign with a target ICP, whether it's in insurance or whatever they've recruited well on. Have them connect with hiring managers and just network, right? A network introduction with some content, and leverage some recruiting, some automations to be more effective there. That's doable, right? And I think sometimes as an owner, you'd be like, okay, is it a 12-month journey versus a 2-month thing, right? Or a 1-month thing? It's if you can kind of layer that on over 6 to 12 months, it doesn't feel it's so overwhelming for them.
Exactly.
Right, as well. Exactly. So I think that's, again, 3 years in, I'm still tackling a lot of these issues and learning it, working with different agencies, but that's kind of what I've been really seeing. Because to me, honestly, I was so well, obviously this works. Like everyone's just going to
Yes,
understand it,
exactly.
but it's not that way, right? And that's one of the jobs I've had to do and get better at as a coach and consultant on this is like meeting people where they're at. And it goes deep with the recruiting piece going into sales.
Definitely.
And I was motivated differently. Like I couldn't wait to get into sales. And there's some
Sure.
people that aren't like that. And sometimes it's like, as you said, is it because they don't even need to do sales or they just don't know the
Yeah,
framework and how to
definitely. And
tackle it?
well, it's interesting too, because I feel like a common, excuse around business development is I'm just so heads down in recruiting right now
Yeah.
that I can't split my time with these two things. And it's at face value, that is a logical, mindset to have. The thing is this though, it's like what we try and preach is business development does not have to be this jump in with both feet, 8 hour day, 9 hour day focus. You can, like you mentioned, you can build automations around it. You can every bit of reach out you do is going to be more effective than not doing reach out.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you build that into your daily cadence that maybe it's 30 minutes of your day is focused on identifying a few new prospects, putting together a campaign specific to them, doing some, specific outreach or targeted relationship building, or whether, it might be following up with your existing accounts. But I think that's the part that gets missed a lot. And in our case, like I do drive a good chunk of our business. One of my partners, also does a great job with that. But our team does bring in business fairly consistently as well. And part of it, like they're not out there doing the outreach consistently, as consistently as I am, let's say, but they're still putting that 30 minutes to an hour in a day, and that little bit makes a difference. Like if you're a recruiter, you're getting funneled, let's say accounts by a salesperson, but you want to really affect your book and go from, let's say, a 200 or 300K biller to a 5 or 600K biller, the quickest way to do that is bring in your own accounts. And I'm just, I've seen it firsthand. It does not take the effort that people think it does, think that they think it does. You have to put in the focused, energy in the right direction, 30 to 60 minutes a day, and you get those, you get the outputs you're looking for.
Absolutely, right? You have some content topics, some Dripify campaigns or whatever that looks like. You can get a post up and running in 15 minutes now, right?
Yeah,
if you kind of have a good starting point in your voice, you can build a campaign out like with a solid list in like an hour or two, and that campaign could run you for a week or two. You can test it out. Like you could put that stuff on autopilot if you want. Like it doesn't have to be that crazy. It's just, I think it is having that discipline to block off an hour a day or an hour 3 times a week and just do it and just embrace the toll of just like how difficult it can be and be open about it. And I think the other half of it I've seen with owners, you do a great job of this, but some owners that, started in the cold call era, place crazy, intense expectations on recruiters without understanding the landscape of like, there's different challenges and there's pride on, you got clients through cold call. There's a lot of pride in that, right? And it's a hell of a skill to have, but just knowing it's 2024, it's different. Right. And you can get a result to your point. You could get even a better result than you did back in the day, leveraging this and making them more dynamic versus just amazing at one thing. And so having that and setting the expectation and the patience, and just being pretty, like, you got to just kind of be blunt about it, right? You got to cut through the noise and be like, yo, what's up? Like, what's stopping you? Like, do you want this, like, for yourself? Because if not, that's okay. You can be a recruiter, but then we also have to kind of stop pretending you're going to be a salesperson. Definitely. As well.
The other thing, cold calling, has gotten more difficult, certainly. I mean, when I first started building business, it was all cold calling. And, back in 2006, 08 time frame, hiring managers would pick up the phone, regularly. I feel like the hit rate on folks actually picking up the phone has gone down dramatically. But, what I am a big believer in, I feel like, this generation that's upcoming, they're great at many things. They're very digitally focused and all of that. But, there's too much of the effort is focused on email and texting and LinkedIn posting. The best, like the most effective thing that we do regularly is pick up the phone and call, existing relationships. It might be someone we haven't spoken to in 18 months, but that we placed 2 people with, or a candidate of ours that got deep in a process and we built a relationship with. Like, pick up the phone and call those people it is the lowest hanging fruit possible.
Yes.
You're really helping people in those instances a lot of times. Like you're making a direct impact with someone you already have a relationship with. Like it's combining all of these things effectively. And, the frustration that I come across a lot is, well, what's the one size fits all that's going to get us business? And we can just do this one thing on repeat. And, we're going to have, 100 new accounts by next week. It just doesn't work like that. Like you have to be consistent. You also, you have to be focused, obviously, but there are, it's from my perspective, it's a little bit of everything.
Yes.
Consistently. Like that's the big word, is consistency. And what I see is this, like we're all in on this one strategy for business development for 3 weeks, and it wasn't quite as effective as we hoped, so it doesn't work. And it's like, no, that's not the case. It's just you didn't do it for 6 months, and you also didn't throw in this other strategy on top of it. It's like that's really what it takes. And like the sales piece, it is more of an art than, it's art and science, but the art piece I feel like is the part that doesn't get enough credit a lot of times.
Amen. I'm with you. And it's one of those, I push LinkedIn a lot, you can see it on my profile. Sure. To create some sort of foundation, right? To just create a true north of like, let's leverage this first. But any long-term clients, we've talked about email, we've talked about SMS, we've talked about calls, all that. One of the most successful tactics, I'd be interested to get your take on it, has been actually leaving voicemails.
Yes.
And because it's just like, the tradition is like, oh, don't leave a voicemail, at least not on the first ring. No, because people read the transcript now. Like right away, they'll screen you out because they don't know the number, but they'll realize, oh, Brandon called me. Oh, okay, cool. Like, what do you have to say? Oh, we connected on LinkedIn. Oh, I thought I did see that, right? They go to LinkedIn, they accept the connection, they see your profile, they see your content. Hey, I appreciate your voicemail. Like, definitely interested in how you could help us, yada, yada. I see it time and time again now. People on the team, people are like, wait, you're okay with cold calls? I was like, I love cold calls. I like winning. Like I like getting great clients, right? And then just thinking through where to meet them. As you said, a little bit of everything consistently is the key. And I've just been seeing that open more and more doors, right? And like that's great, right? It's like you can leverage that, and it doesn't feel, because I think sometimes people feel like LinkedIn can be a little bit passive at times, or maybe they're not on there. It's like, okay, well, like how can you keep pushing the issue? But there's so much more intentionality with that quote unquote cold call. It's really more of a warm call because you have different talking points about why you connected on LinkedIn, all that. Yeah, I saw you had a open RN role for 6 months. I just placed 10 people in Wichita. Like I thought it might be worth us connecting. They hear the voicemail, they see it, they're like, yes, absolutely. Right. And the approach is much more intentional and much better, well received. So,
yes. Yeah. Well, because it's interesting too. I mean, business development and what people respond to does seem to go in trends.
Yep.
I found that a lot of folks, they'll like find that one that's hitting and they'll repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And all of a sudden it doesn't work as well because everybody's caught on and everybody's doing the same thing. So it is like, how are you balancing that and creating the best process that, that's going to give you the advantage? It's going to make you stand out. And, I do think like hiring managers are not necessarily picking up the phone for a cold call, but like you said, if you leave that voicemail, at least half the time they're going to listen to it or see the transcript. And then that email or LinkedIn message you sent, all of a sudden you're not a stranger anymore. Yeah. They've heard your voice. They see you're a real person, and it makes the likelihood of them responding to you that much more. It makes the reach out that much more effective.
Absolutely, and it's also why LinkedIn automation as a pure pitch works way less effectively now than it did 4 years ago.
Yes,
right? And that's why I teach people. I think they get sometimes like amazed when they come into the program. Like this messaging is simple and all that. I'm like, yeah, it's also made people a heck of a lot of money because like holistically with that approach, you're generating conversations, right? Because I have no idea if someone's going to be a great client or a bad client from a cold outreach. My job is to figure out, are they interested? Is the timing right? And could you be a great client, right? So you have to respect that it takes a few steps and you have to let the interaction breed, and you got to do your work to make someone that they should respond to. Because now he said they've been hit up by everyone under the sun. So it just doesn't work the way it did 4 years ago. So I've got to kind of evolve that. That's why we push content. It's all about getting kind of those great clients, right? So that's just kind of one of the, to kind of highlight what you're talking about of things have to evolve. That's like one of the biggest ones that I've seen. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things too is people, folks think that if they just start posting, they're going to, like, all of a sudden the inbounds are going to start rolling
Yeah.
in. And you do get occasional inbounds, but it's more about when you reach out with, about the opening or about connecting after not speaking for a while. You're not a stranger.
Yeah. Warm outbound.
It's warm. That's really what it is. It makes
Yep.
it that they think they know who you are at the end of the day. Makes it that much easier to connect.
Yep.
So, I mean, I still could do a much better job with my LinkedIn posting, but like that, like I've seen that as the biggest advantage to doing it, is it just makes it that much easier to get a response when you reach out.
Well, it's different phases, right? You post, it's effective, and then there's levels of, like, once you start posting content, like, wow, there's a lot of levels to get to with, like, the quality of the content and where I can take this.
Sure.
And, that's why I exist and why I love doing what I do, because I like helping people get to those levels and really think through. Like, I had a content interview this morning for a client we're doing video and text content for the last 3 months. And we were kind of like remarking, like, month 1 was good. Month 2, we made some pivots. He's like, month 3, like, man, like, we got it dialed in now. Like, you know me, I know you. We have this, like, it's just, we put the reps in, right? It doesn't take all of his time. It doesn't take him 10 hours to work with us, but it's like we had fun at even engaging in that content. Even though we're saving him a ton of time, he's not like treating it like a throwaway, like, oh, like, just go do my content. Like, no, I have to engage in my content and my voice and everything else. And it's going to be him, and we're going to edit it, and it's all his words and everything else. But, like, that's just what it takes. It's just intentionality. He's a $500,000, $600,000 a year biller, right? But he puts that much time, that thought, that intentionality behind it to kind of keep leveling up and all that, because he knows what it does to the rest of his business. I think to AI, to sales, to outbound, those are the owners like yourself that are, whether you want to be solo forever, you want to build a team like you're doing, like, that's the type of agency that's going to win and for the long haul, like, definitely, going forward. So, yeah, again, could talk about it all day, but I want to ask you,
sure,
how do you figure out who to target? Why do you target who you target? Like, I want to get that thought process, because that's a big thing that we get from listeners of this. Is like, how do I pick a niche? Do I need to? Yada yada. And I know you're going to have an interesting take on it.
Sure.
So curious on what that process is like for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, when I first started back in 2008, I had found that health tech was a pretty untapped market for recruiting.
Yeah.
And it was like early stage, like EMRs and like early stages of like telemedicine and all of that. And I started tapping into those clients. So I saw, okay, I have, I'm working with this one client, we just placed 4 or 5 people with them. Let me see if I can reach out and use that as a reason to get my foot in the door with another health tech company. And then that, evolved from there, and that grew into working with a lot of just early stage tech companies in general that we were getting introduced to. And I found that there was a connection point there because of some of the recruiting that we had done. Over time, we wanted to, as we're looking to scale the business, so this was around 2015, we started realizing, like, these early stage companies are fantastic. They, they have a lot of hiring. They're very exciting to recruit for, but they also go in waves. They tend to hire like crazy for 6 to 18 months. Then there maybe is a shift in funding. There's a shift in, in priorities of the business. And we found that they, like I said, they were great for 6 to 18 months, but you were constantly in this mode of having to, drive new clients in that space, which again, you should be doing anyway. But, we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we grow this business and make it as sustainable as possible? So that led to us going after, some larger mid-market companies, and then, slowly growing into Fortune 500s. And now we work with some of the biggest consulting firms, some of the biggest, companies globally. But, it's all been sort of intentional, like, how would I frame it? Like unintentional, intentional growth, where we'll get that one client that one, let's say, I don't want to name any client names necessarily, but say we're working with one of the bigger media companies. Well, there's a great foot in the door to reach out to the 10 other major media companies. You have this proof of concept already. You can show that you understand their market. We tend to be specialized in technology as our core. We do occasionally get asked to work on other positions, but that's really been our bread and butter over the years. So I would say we're not, so laser focused on one niche, but we are focused in the sense that our core is technology. And then it's really finding out, what are the markets that are hiring for this? Where do we have past precedents, and where do we have proof of concept, and how do we continue growing in those spaces? And what we found is naturally, It's over time. It goes back to that building relationships piece. Like we've had, I mean, some of our best clients have been, we start working with someone, let's say an internal recruiter, they leave, they go to another big company, and then who's the first person they're calling? They're calling our team because they had a good relationship and we worked well together. So that's been a big part of it. But like using the market we're in right now as an example, last year, half our business is consulting firms and tech companies. A lot of that business dried up pretty quickly. So as a quick pivot, like, oh my God, like where do we go to get consistent openings? And, we started looking at the market. We're like, well, manufacturing and industrial is an area we haven't done a lot of work in. But they have a ton of tech jobs. Like we're working now with several food manufacturers. We're working with one of the biggest like roofing manufacturers globally, and they're leveraging AI. They're hiring machine learning engineers. They're hiring data scientists. They're hiring cybersecurity and software engineering. Like they have the same needs. And it's just interesting. Like you got to figure out who is hiring and where can you make the biggest impact with your service. And what we started realizing in the past 18 months is like we can bring innovative folks that they wouldn't necessarily have access to in manufacturing from other industries. And that's a huge value add. So, we're seeing, healthcare is another good one. I mean, we do some work in that space, but I feel like that's an untapped market, that we're constantly hearing of, shortages of talent and things like that.
Well, healthcare tech, yeah, for sure. And I've had some clients have a lot of success getting in there. And I think you just gave like a 5-minute masterclass on how to approach business development. I mean, I think the phrase proof of concept is it. I mean, that is ultimately what you want. And it doesn't have to be crazy to get there, to get that proof of concept. And that's typically, that's the perfect answer. It's like, well, what do you have a proof of concept on? And lead into that, double down on, spin that, because that's how you stand out. That's how you stand out from all the 50 other agencies that hit them up this month already. So like, it's just, you have that. It's reducing the friction is what I always say. Like you're looking for where you have the least amount of friction points to new clients, to retaining clients, to getting more market share out of current clients, like whatever that looks like. It's even making placements, right? With the candidate, like you want to reduce friction points. And so you like strategically, that's where you want to look at.
Definitely. And the first client is the toughest. That's the issue. It's like once you have that first client, it's easy to run with it from there. You placed 5, 6, 7 people at that health tech company. Reach out to the next health tech company. You now have proof of concept that you can deliver in that space. You have, because I know a lot of your audience isn't Robert Half and Aerotech and tech systems. It's 1, 2, maybe 10 person recruiting firms. Like you have to really stand out beyond just, hey, we're another recruiting firm that knows security engineering.
You got to own it. You got to own it. You got to be invested in it. And I like that you are industry agnostic, but you kind of have the specialty in tech that also allowed you to pivot in a tough market, but still have a specialty and still own it. I mean, again, there's so many ways to get creative and to be intentional and just be thoughtful. And sometimes there can be a lack of that. And it's an easy trap to fall into, of just kind of the spray and pray. It's like, oh, it's recruiting. How hard can it be? It's like, well, you can make it really hard on yourself. Sure. It can also make some things a lot easier. Just, again, make it make sense. Like, would it make sense to your prospect? Would it make sense to someone that you're talking at happy hour, right? Or the dinner party that's like, well, what do you do? Right? It's like, oh, I don't really know. I got to do what do you need? It's like, sure. Like one of those. It's like, no, like we find like tech professionals in healthcare tech and robotics and manufacturing and food production. Like, oh, that makes sense. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, tell me more about that, right? Like, can it pass kind of the small talk test too? It is a good way to think about it. It's something I always have to think about with Digital Recruiter. Because I'm like, well, we do marketing, we do recruiting, we also do coaching. Like, it's like I have to kind of, I have to listen to my own advice at times. But like, it's a constant practicing of that, and it can evolve. But I think if you're doing that, that can alleviate a lot of headaches on the back end of why is no one replying, or why can't we get feedback and all that. It's like, you don't really know who you are and who you serve.
Well, depending on your audience too, though, like when you're talking to someone looking for coaching, that is something you deliver at a high level. You have a team behind you that does recruiting. It's the same thing. I think on our end, it's been you have to understand who the client is, and you have to share with them the information that's relevant to them.
Exactly.
The other part of it is don't reach out to a manufacturing company about technology if you haven't done any of your research on, what those companies really need to be successful. Like, I feel like that happens a lot. And it's just, hey, we have this candidate, excuse me, it's like a spray and pray approach. And it's like, that's not going to be effective long-term.
Yeah.
Like, showing that you genuinely care about their industry, about making an impact with their business, about finding them the best people that are going to be motivated to work in their industry. That's what's really important. I think that part gets missed with a lot of like outbound reach out. That's why I'm just so, frankly, that's why I do double down on the relationship side. Because for me, the biggest thing, that's the most important piece, and I think you can do this in cold outbound too, but you have to be really skilled, is not just coming across as being genuine, but actually genuinely caring about, who you're working with. So I think that's a big part of it. And that goes, that's always my fear with doing the, some of the cold outreach, is like, I want to make sure I'm still coming across, like myself at the end of the day.
You're spot on. I tell people, figure out how to build relationships first before you build a systems. Or you invest in more tools. If you have that down, then sure, we can talk about that. But if you don't, go get the reps, like learn the hard way, and then come back to me, right? Because you're not going to listen to anything I got to say if you don't understand how hard this is and respect the grind and
Sure.
the importance of building a relationship, how to do it and have done it and built great ones. And honestly, probably not had some great ones too. I've learned more from the ones that didn't work out when I was at Aerotech than the ones that did. And that's also sometimes where I learned, like, oh, those are people I don't want to deal with, and that's okay. Not every client is great for me. So kind of going through that and letting that be part of your learning curve is a must.
Well, another interesting thing that's sort of like an untapped area, I think at times, where we're so focused on what's the low hanging fruit, where can we get that immediate opening? And like, obviously that's important to be, focus on your bottom line. But at the same time, like, think about how many people, like really talented people, were out of work in tech over the past 18 months. There has been an uptick in hiring, thankfully, but like, there's an opportunity to make an impact, with someone that could really use the help during that time. Yeah. And it's not about, reaching out to them to help because that's going to be advantageous for you from a business context. But like, that is the quickest and easiest way to start building your network, building your relationships, showing that you care when there isn't something directly in it for you. And inevitably, like, people respect that and they appreciate it. And, it doesn't always come back around, but, it does at times.
Yeah.
And you've now built a relationship in trust. And, that's when you can make the biggest impact.
You work and live to serve, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And you can serve without getting trampled on or having your boundaries crossed and everything else. And you got to definitely have to figure that stuff out too. But that's where knowing your lane makes it a lot easier to serve people in that lane over and over again. I could talk LinkedIn all day. I mean, the amount of times I've helped people with their profile, their messaging, the drip 100 thousands of times by now. Yeah. I still love it. Like, I still do it because, like, it's opening the eyes of someone that didn't know that, right? And all that before and can talk at a high level. Like, I do it all day, every day. It doesn't get boring to me, because it's inspiring me to see that change in people, the light bulb moment go on. And sometimes there's frustrations and all that, of course, but like, they're all ones that I can deal with and manage and learn from. And it's all kind of impacting this ecosystem. And it sounds like you have the same thing, right? It's like, okay, well, this healthcare tech client didn't work out. Like, maybe we can go to this other one. It might work out and all that. It's just like, there's always something. You could always spin something in opportunity in this industry. I think that's what I love about it, either from like a recruiting or coaching side. Just have to have that like evolution, like mindset, like, or evolving mindset.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I would say on this point is I'm a big believer that the best business development is delivering at the highest quality possible once you have a client. Like, I feel like, you hear these, oh, I signed a client. It's like, great. That's awesome. I'm excited for you. But that's just the beginning. Like, have you qualified this client effectively? Are they a company we really want to work with at the end of the day? And then, are we delivering at the highest level possible? Because that's how we've had a lot of success with referrals, and that's how we've built a lot of our business, is like, deliver at a high level, build relationships, and the referrals come over time. So if you have that combined with a good outbound approach, like, you're unstoppable.
Game, set, match. It's wise words. I think everyone needs to really heed that's listening, because it is fulfillment is your best friend to more business and to growth. And so I always ask people, what's the start date? What's the consequence of not filling and all that? Go get that information before you waste all your time, right? And their time. So,
Yes.
to that point, the one last thing we'll cover, because I know we're coming to the hour, is I love that you have the approach of like investing in your team and kind of trying different things out. Like, talk to people like what the importance that is like for you and having that and having your team have the opportunity to kind of training and like learning and like, yeah, what's the importance of that for you and for the firm?
Definitely. I mean, it's really important. And, you and I touched on it briefly, but, we've found over time, we're better off having fewer employees that are really engaged, that are going to deliver, as, in the quantum way, that understand how we do business, how we hold ourselves accountable. But that means that, we also have to focus on upskilling our team, making sure we're coaching them, relentlessly, that we're collaborative as a team. So, when someone starts with us, like let's say a new recruiter, we do have this detailed recruiter training program we put them through. That's typically going to be someone that, let's say, has maybe a year of recruiting experience, or is coming from like an outside sales role or something along those lines. That's just to get them started, to really understand how we like to work. Our team is also really collaborative, so it is interesting. Like pre-pandemic, we were 5 days a week in the office, Arlington, Virginia. It was great, collaboration and teamwork, camaraderie, all of that. And then 2020 hit, and we went full remote at that point, and because of COVID and all of that. And now half our team, even now that things have settled down, moved out of state. Like, we were very flexible on that. We wanted people to be able to live their lives still, and it just becomes that much more difficult at that point. Like, how do you instill your core values? How do you instill your culture at that point? And that's where we've found like maybe our hiring is a little slower than it could be internally, but it also allows us the chance to really focus on upskilling someone to the point where we feel confident that they're going to represent us in the best way possible. So a big part of that is like, we've really emphasized collaboration on our team. So a lot of our more senior, team members, and I think it might just be like who we have on the team working here. I don't know if this is everybody, but they're all willing to go out of their way to provide feedback and encouragement and coaching. And it's like, I don't know, we've kind of built this thing. And it might be because we're still a smaller firm that we can do this effectively, but there really is like a true sense of camaraderie, even though we're fully remote. The other thing, it's like, if you're in an environment where your manager isn't looking over your shoulder every few minutes, like, the only way to be successful, is to live out, what we consider our core values. So some of them are, it's action, intellect, passion, and excellence are 4 of our core values. And, at the end of the day, like, we want to know that the folks that are representing us are living those on a daily basis. So it's something that from the second someone starts with us, like, we make sure that they're aware, like, this is the quantum way of operating. If you can get in line with this, like, we offer a lot of autonomy. There's a lot of opportunity for growth, but like, this is the expectation from day one. And we found that the best recruiters we have, the ones that produce at the highest level. I mean, we have a seven-figure biller on our team consistently. We have several folks in that, 5 to 700K range consistently. And a big part of that is they're willing to live those things out day in and day out. And they're also willing to coach up the team to get them up to speed at that level. The only other thing I would say, we are big proponents of continuous learning. So we've actually paid to have several of our colleagues go through executive coaching. And, a big part of that justification is we're a lean team. It's important for us to be upskilling and, providing opportunities for growth beyond just, here's a new account.
Incredible. I think you've laid out the blueprint from BD, from recruiting to training to core principles. It's like, that should be the goal. Like, every owner strives for it. I know you live them, and it comes through in the results, and it's just super cool. So I can't thank you enough for coming on, like, sharing the journey. I mean, this has been a masterclass in terms of, I think, how to run a firm, have the right people, with the business development, like building the relationship approach. This is a good one. So I appreciate you so much, just like coming on here and just sharing the wisdom, man. It's awesome.
Well, I've learned a lot from you, and seeing your posts and some of the conversations we've had also. So I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, of course. Well, we'll have Brandon's LinkedIn, social, the website, all that good stuff on the episode page. Connect with him, check it out. Does things the right way. There's a lot that I learned from Brandon, and that you guys can as well. That's all I got, man. This is great to do.
Cool.
All right.
Go Giants.
Oh man, I say go Pats, but we're getting the #1 pick next year again. So,
Yeah.
oh well. All right, y'all. We'll see you next time.